Brothers and sisters, we've just heard from the Gospel of Mark, the shortest of the four Gospels, 16 chapters long. An interesting feature of the Gospel is that a whole chapter, a rather apocalyptic chapter, a part of which we have just heard, is dedicated to the big political issues of the day. In particular, what many think was the prophecy of the Jewish revolt against the Romans, which would alas lead to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD and the slaughter of tens of thousands of people. The tragedy of all this is perhaps something we can feel all the more on this Remembrance Sunday, when we remember and pray for those who have fallen in battle, those who have suffered and died through acts of war, and those who are left behind to grieve and mourn. So a big part of the background to Jesus' words in today's Gospel is that he is addressing a people on the brink of great trouble, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the signs of the impending catastrophe were already there a few decades before. There were many tensions and much unease, an all too fragile peace. Indeed, one of Jesus' apostles was Simon, called by Luke the Zealot. There is a dispute about what this means. It could mean that Simon was zealous in terms of the law and religious faith, but some think Luke was implying that Simon had links with nationalists strongly opposed to the Roman occupation, a group that would in time come to be known as the Zealots. It would be they who would lead the disastrous revolt against Rome several decades after Jesus' death. This is all a bit gloomy, isn't it? Especially fairly early on in the morning. But if this is the state of affairs of Jesus' day, then quite simply, Jesus was not going to bury his head in the sand about an important but difficult truth. Indeed, Jesus gave an honest warning which the people could choose to heed or choose not to heed. And if the people took heed, then they could perhaps do something about the situation. To give an honest warning can be a great act of kindness. But Jesus also gave comfort and reassurance that even if things go badly wrong, God's ways will triumph in the end. He says, "But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory." And part of being able to heed the warnings Jesus gives is that we should be alive to the signs of the times. To make this point, Jesus tells his disciples to learn a lesson from the fig tree. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know the summer is near. Shortly before in the Gospel of Mark, however, we have the fig tree cursed for being barren. But now the fig tree is beginning to bud and presumably bear fruit. We are, in other words, to seek to interpret things correctly, to both recognize when things are going wrong and to recognize when things are going right. Much apocalyptic literature has been taken up with looking for signs to try to predict the future in a fortune teller or esoteric sort of way. But Jesus is saying that it's not to be like this. Rather than sensationalistic flights of fancy, we should be alert to the signs of our times that are about us. And we should trust God in all this, including when we do not know what is in store and we'll simply have to wait in order to find out. Indeed, even Jesus, the Son, sometimes did not know the hour when certain events would take place. His whole focus was on trusting the Father. He says, "But of that day or that hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven or the Son, but only the Father." Perhaps many of the signs of our times are rather complicated. Regarding political events of recent years, there is some divergence of view, but many are feeling unsettled. Yet when it comes to how we treat our planet, however, the signs of our times seem a good deal less unclear. The first reading from Daniel, which speaks of Michael, the great prince, traditionally identified by Christians with St. Michael the Archangel, the great foe of the devil, reminded me of Pope Leo XIII, who composed the famous and powerful prayer to St. Michael. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in the day of battle, be our safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil, and so on. But it was also Pope Leo XIII who wrote the first great encyclical of modern Catholic social teaching, Rerum Novarum, in 1891. This was the Pope's response to the sign of his times, when it seemed as if much of the world was heading towards division and violence due to the massive inequalities brought about by the Industrial Revolution and other factors. Like Jesus, Pope Leo gave a warning. There is perhaps an important parallel here with Pope Francis and his famous encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. This is what Pope Francis says in chapter 1. Warming has effects on the carbon cycle. It creates a vicious circle which aggravates the situation even more, affecting the availability of essential resources like drinking water, energy and agricultural production in warmer regions, and leading to the extinction of part of the planet's biodiversity. Climate change is a global problem with grave implications. It represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity in our day. Its worst impact will probably be felt by developing countries in coming decades. All generations have their potentially impending crises, but there are almost always warnings there too for those who are prepared to heed them. Having heard Pope Francis and others, we cannot say that we have not been warned, and many will be very thankful and relieved that there was, despite its imperfections, an agreement in Glasgow yesterday. In a society of much unbelief and often little hope, we Christians have a special role to play for the good of our world, to pray for our world, to actively help our world to heed the signs of the times and to respond appropriately, and very importantly, to uphold a spirit of hope even in the face of difficulty and human foolishness, a spirit of hope founded on God's promise to be with us to the end of the age. Perhaps this combination of we pray, courageous realism combined with prayerful witness to genuine hope, perhaps this combination will be our greatest and most distinctively Christian gift to the world. And if the saints, not least St. Michael, can give us a helping hand, then all the better.